Today we are joined by Tom Scrope, who is the Aquaculture Manager at NovaQ. Tom, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks very much for having me on, Sarah.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about NovaQ and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. So, NovaQ, we call ourselves environmental sustainability specialists. I guess what that means is we try and find the best product process innovations across a range of sectors. So we don't just work in aquaculture, wastewater, agriculture, anaerobic digestion, and then we try and bring those to the market. I guess in whichever sector we're working to, we're always looking to try and basically reduce the environmental footprint of those. So what we do in aquaculture is mainly, well, entirely focused on RAS farms. That's recirculating aquaculture systems. So these on-land systems, I'm sure lots of people are familiar with them, where the fish are grown, the water is just recirculated round and round and cleaned through a series of filters. And the specific bit of the system that we're interested in is the biofilter. So where you're getting bacteria to clean out toxins that the fish are producing, primarily ammonia, which it would be toxic if it builds up to levels in this recycled water. And we cycle that into kind of non-toxic elements. So kind of a biofilter is suddenly not something we've invented. It's not a new design. The innovation, or what we're trying to do differently, is to really take control of the microbiome in those systems. So the bacteria, particularly that are developing in those systems. The kind of current state of the art is that people will seed one of those systems. There's a few different kind of commercial inoculants on the market, and then they'll just leave it to develop. They'll kind of assume that with the natural makeup water and the bacteria that come into the system from other sources, that biofilter will just kind of develop in a positive way. There are certainly people who've run RAS farms that have kind of managed with that approach. Where we're coming from is a background in wastewater, where you kind of wouldn't accept that lack of control, really. And compared to all the other parts of the systems that you're controlling really tightly, the wastewater view is kind of, why wouldn't you also try and control the microbiome? It's this like key filter that's really important for your water quality. So why wouldn't you, if you're relying so much on these microbes, why aren't you monitoring that and trying to manage it? So that's what we do in wastewater treatment successfully for the last 10-15 years. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we kind of have brought the same approach over to aquaculture, to RAS aquaculture. I guess it started actually when some RAS farmers started buying our wastewater bacteria to start inoculating their systems. We didn't really know what RAS was at that point, and been on a crash course, I guess, over the last years. But we found, obviously lots of similarities. I mean, a lot of the filtration systems in these RAS actually developed out of wastewater anyway. So there's a lot of similarities, but we feel like maybe RAS biofilter, there's a bit of catching up we can do to kind of improve the performance there, improve the stability. So the products that we actually offer is, we've got this range of bacterial products, which we can do a startup, like I described before, but the key thing we're trying to promote is this concept we've developed of active microbiome management, which basically involves not just leaving it after the startup, when you've kind of inoculated a population of bacteria. You then say, well, we're not just going to let that develop however it wants. We're going to keep on trying to control it with constant additions. So that's kind of a new idea for the RAS industry. It's being taken up quite fast in Scotland and Norway now. We just appointed a new distributor in Norway, and we're getting some great results from that. So yeah, happy to speak to any of that if that's of interest to people.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and it's interesting because that constant control is so important. Like, you'd never just leave things to see how they develop.
Absolutely right, and in every other part of the system. So whether it's the genetics, the millions and billions of pounds that have been spent on optimizing salmon genetics, say in a lot of these RAS systems, or feed, and those are great developments, and that's how the RAS and the salmon industry is developing. I mean, there's that kind of old cliche that what sheep or beef farming has done in 12,000 years, salmon farming has had to do over the last 40 years, right? So we're at this kind of race development, and it seems, in our view at least, that the biofilters in these RAS systems were just at risk of being kind of left a bit behind from that development, and we're trying to bring them up to that same level of control that you demand in any other part of these very expensive systems. Why are you leaving this kind of black box that you're not controlling?
No, it makes a lot of sense, absolutely. And in terms of, let's say, the Irish aquaculture community, like, I know you're working a lot with RAS, but is there anything there that would be of interest?
Certainly. So
Yeah,
there's a few RAS research institutes. So the Marine Institute,
yeah,
Bantry, also focusing on cleaner fish more, but down in Bantry Marine Research Station. So we've done a lot of work with them. We've got some good results again from using these techniques of constant dosing. There are a few kind of smaller RAS hatcheries. I guess maybe the challenge for us with Irish aquaculture is that particularly the salmon sector has gone down the route of organic, and that's great. It really fits with the kind of brand, and there's been a great brand developed over the years. But the current EU rules limit the use of RAS for what you can call organic fish, basically. Particularly stocking densities is always going to be a challenge, because to make these RAS feasible financially, they need to have relatively high stocking densities, and that kind of doesn't fit with the organic ethos. Now, that's completely fine. In the agriculture business we work in, we're completely organic. Julian, the founder of NovaQ, actually just stepped down as the chairman of the Irish Organic Association. So we're fully on board with organic food production, and we're certainly not trying to fight it. But in terms of our aquaculture work, it does mean that I guess we're probably more looking to say Norway and Scotland and Canada and those sort of markets. But if there is anyone in Ireland who is running a RAS, I'm interested, please get in touch. We're based in Dublin and have all our stock there, so very happy to help out. But the main kind of focus for where we're trying to scale this idea is Norway particularly.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge there, so it makes a lot of sense. And in terms of, you were saying earlier that you've kind of come into the aquaculture space in the last sort of 4 or 5 years or so. So kind of what stage of development are all the products at?
So yeah, we first started supplying RAS farms, I say, about 4 or 5 years ago. Originally, we were just supplying them with the kind of our wastewater bacteria, and then we kind of would adapt those. About 3 years ago, we kind of decided this was an interesting market and have developed a RAS specific brand. So it's called RAS Right. So it's based on the same bacteria species from wastewater, but specifically adapted to RAS. We've got a freshwater marine versions of those products. The other innovation, I guess, which is fairly unique compared to how people manage their bacteria, is again drawn from wastewater. We encourage farms to set up a bioreactor, a kind of grow tank on site.
Oh, okay.
Instead of just having bottles of product that you order from us and you put straight into your system, which is kind of what other people would offer as well, whether it's a powder or whatever, you put it straight into the system. We say, no, put that into this separate grow tank and then grow up, and then you get much larger volumes of bacteria to dose your system for kind of the same price as the original few bottles. So it allows for much more powerful results without kind of ramping up the cost. It also gives you, because the bacteria are grown up in the same sort of water that they're going to encounter when they're in the system, when they go into the system, they don't have a kind of shock of having to adapt. They're kind of ready to hit the ground running, basically. So we find kind of faster, better results through that, and it's also more cost effective. So that's a kind of another innovation that we've brought across, and it's been specifically developed now for RAS over the last 2 years. So I guess where we are now, it's kind of ready to go. The products can be ordered even just on our website, nova-q.ie. But I mean, for larger farms, we really focus on working very closely with farmers to develop kind of bespoke dosing protocol based on how quickly they need to set up the system, how much pressure there's going to be immediately. So I guess really the message is, if it's of interest, please get in touch. But it's a product that's on the market, it's being scaled. We're getting more and more data through, both from commercial sites and from the research trials that we put in place over the last couple of years. So yeah, it's ready to go, and we're in scaling mode really.
Oh, it's fantastic. And I think you kind of touched off it there. My next question was, how does it compare to other solutions on the market? And because you're setting up these sort of grow tanks as such, which is really interesting.
So yeah, the grow tanks is certainly unique. We've never seen anyone else doing that in the experience of the farmers we've talked to. No one else has kind of suggested that. So that's a unique approach. And then the other unique approach is this concept of active microbiome management, the constant dosing. So there are certainly other bacterial solutions, as I say. They're really focused on starting up doing that. I guess where we think we have a difference is maintaining that kind of long-term community that you want, rather than just starting it up and then letting it go whichever way it's going to go. We're kind of basically trying to sell that control of your water quality over time. I guess what allows that is and maybe why it would be hard for some other bacteria providers to say run a grow tank is that when you start growing up these species over time, unless you are really in control of the feed that you're giving the bacteria, so we have a special powdered feed, what you end up doing is just feeding the really fast growing species more than some of the slow growing species. The problem with that is often the slow growing species are the ones that you want, particularly for nitrification, which is this key process in RAS, removing the ammonia. The bacteria that do that, the nitrifying bacteria they're called, are very slow to replicate. So if you aren't in control of what you're feeding the bacteria in, say, a grow tank, all you'll do is feed a load of other bacteria that kind of grow really fast. Like rabbits, effectively, it's this idea of R versus K strategists if you're into your kind of biology. And what that means is then all the useful bacteria that you're trying to add get swamped out. And so if you were running a grow tank and you didn't know what you were doing, all you'd be doing after a month is constantly adding bad bacteria and actually leading your system down the wrong way. So the only way you can make these grow tanks and constant dosing work is if you've kind of done all the R&D on maintaining the stable consortium of good bacteria over time. And that's basically what we and our partners in the US who produce the bacteria have been doing for the last 30 years, is trying to crack that code. So we feel like we're in a fairly unique position to be able to offer that. And hopefully, maybe other people will try and come into the market and help bring on this idea of constant dosing and active microbiome management, because we feel we're trying to change an industry mindset here. So we wouldn't mind a few other people banging on about the same message as us. But it's taken us 20 or 30 years to do the R&D to be able to do that safely. So whether anyone else will be able to catch up, who knows?
Yeah, I know you're well ahead of them all. No, that's great. And I suppose it makes sense to maintain the whole microbiome across the board. Like, you don't want, like you said, like you're just your bad bacteria flourishing away and then you're feeding them back into the system.
Absolutely. And I guess where a lot of the research has been on is, so historically the kind of the main role that anyone was just wanting from a biofilter, as I say, was just this idea of nitrification, removing ammonia. And as long as it did that, you could kind of tick, it's doing its job. I guess maybe where the industry is moving to now is seeing that there's actually the bacteria can do a lot more for your system. So or potentially they can cause damage in other ways if they're not managed. So one big issue in a lot of these RAS farms is hydrogen sulfide, which can be produced by basically sulfate reducing bacteria, which we'd class basically as bad bacteria, establishing a foothold in your system in the right conditions, particularly in seawater where there's high sulfates in the water. And so what we've found with this constant dosing technique is that having a large population of good bacteria added in constantly effectively competitively excludes those bad bacteria, whether they're producing H2S, or we've just done a recent study on Josmin, which is this off flavor, makes fish taste sort of muddy, again, produced by sort of the species you don't want, non-beneficial species. So if you can constantly dose and crowd out those bad species with your good bacteria, you then are solving those other problems. The key thing there is back to that previous point about the balance. You want to competitively exclude the bad guys, but you don't want to also competitively exclude your slow growing nitrifiers. So that's the key balance of kind of what we think makes this a unique solution, is we can have the positive impacts with competitive exclusion, but also add so many nitrifiers at the same time that we're never at risk of damaging the main function, which is so that's kind of why we think we're hopefully a fairly unique position.
No, it's interesting. I think just that whole microbiome area is quite a hot topic right now. I think for agriculture rather. I think just for human health as well. So I think it's something people will be very familiar with. In the next year.
Definitely linking it, whether it's in, a lot of our work in agriculture is using bacteria to improve soil organic matter effectively, and the bacteria populations in soil, which we're discovering are so important. It's such a really interesting book by a guy called David Montgomery, basically comparing the soil microbiome and how that works with our gut microbiome. And they basically, root systems of plants and the soil microbiome and the mycorrhizal fungi, which are so quite sexy at the moment, in certain circles, have basically developed in exactly the same way as our gut cells. So there are still microbiota in your gut wall and your stomach that act in very similar ways. They basically are like they're attaching to a root nodule, and they help cycle nutrients for your gut. So the two systems have developed very similarly, and as you say, whether it's just because sequencing's developed over the last few years and 16S sequencing is more available, but we're certainly finding that people are getting more interested in the microbiome.
We are, yeah.
The step we think needs to be taken above just monitoring it is then, okay, we now know what's in our microbiome. What do we do about it? How do we change it? How do we get the better solution? So it's great to monitor, but you then need to be able to do something about it, and that's the step.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it kind of leads me on to my next question. You were sort of saying you have a lot of kind of R&D going on over the last sort of 20, 30 years nearly. And so like, what are the next steps now for NovaQ and for the products?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess a couple of years ago, what we developed these products, and we were kind of trying to take those around the market. And the message we really got back was, this is interesting, and you've got all the data from wastewater to back it up, but where's the data of how this actually works in a RAS farm? So we did have a few initial customers who kind of understood the idea and trialed it with us. But a lot of the work over the last 2 years has basically been putting together the data bank of how these products work in aquaculture. So we were fairly confident because from the kind of first times we were applying it in RAS, it was behaving very similarly to how it behaves in a wastewater treatment plant, basically, in terms of providing stability. So we kind of had the confidence in the product, but getting the data to back that up to be able to share with, the Mauis or the Leroys or the Griegs of this world, who, these huge international companies who, they need the data to fit in, to kind of prove it in their processes, to get it up through the chain. So that's a lot of what we've been setting up over the last couple of years. We're actually releasing the results today of Josmin study that we've been doing over in British Columbia. So that's competitive exclusion of basically the bacteria or the species causing this muddy flavor. We've had great results over 6 months in bringing that down below 5 nanograms per liter, so 5 parts per trillion, which is the kind of very low detection level of muddy flavor, and then holding it down there, which the site managers there who've had problems with this for a couple of years just basically described as the first time they've ever been able to do this, of bringing their Josmin levels down and holding them down. That's
fantastic.
So those results are being released today. In the new year, we're releasing the results from a trial we did with SAMS up in Oban, which was funded by UKRI. That was, again, using these sequencing techniques to directly compare systems that have had this constant dosing versus systems that just were started up, as I described. So trying to see what actually is happening to the microbiome over time when we just let it develop in whichever way it wants, and then we try and control it. And the initial results are confirming the hypothesis that we were sort of fingers crossed hoping, which is the microbiome where you're constantly dosing looks much more stable than the other microbiomes. They sort of go off in their own way. That fits with the kind of water and fish health data that we were getting throughout the trial, that we were getting better results from the constantly dosed systems, but we're just going through the sequencing results now, and it's great to see fit into this hypothesis that that makes sense. If you keep on adding a lot of good bacteria, they're probably going to help stabilize the system. They might not, we wouldn't expect them to completely take over. There's always going to be other sources of bacteria, but they just provide, we call it a beneficial backbone into the biofilter. So it just stops it veering too far away from what you want. It's great. Results will be released in the new year, and we're setting up new research trials. We've got one in Indiana we're about to set up, looking again at this idea of comparing different rates of constant dosing. So at our standard constant dose, a higher dose versus controls. That'll be in a bigger salmon farm, actually. So this work's ongoing, and if there are any people who want to work on research from us, we're very much a kind of research focused organization as well, so very happy to look at more collaborations on that front.
Which is great, and it's nice you have all these positive results now coming into the new year. You can kind of relax now at Christmas and take a break.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. And Tom, finally, if anyone wanted to find out more about the work you're doing and about NovaQ, where's the best place to go?
The best place is to either email me, so my email is tom@nova-q.ie, or take a look on our website. So again, it's nova-q.ie. There's a whole aquaculture section of our website.